Hello everyone and welcome to the Crossover Deep Dive. Today I am here with the wonderful Kirsten Agresta Copely. Hi Kirsten.
Hello, it's nice to be here with you, Natasha.
It's so nice to meet you in person. Thank you for coming.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
And I am so delighted we're going to get to hear you play today, which is a real treat. So can I ask you, Kirsten, a little bit about how you started? Because it seems like you were something of a prodigy. You were touring by 14. So how did your journey begin?
Well, I started playing the harp when I was 5 years old. My mother was a musician, and she was very interested in unusual instruments. And so, there were lots of different instruments in our house growing up, but she found an ad in the local paper. I grew up outside of Detroit, Michigan. And she found an ad in the paper for a used harp, and she thought it would be really interesting to have just for her own enjoyment.
Yeah.
And apparently, being the precocious 5-year-old that I was at that time, I decided to sit down and start, plucking it myself. And she thought it's probably a good idea to get her lessons. So that began my journey.
And did you started with a smaller instrument, I suppose?
I did, okay. Yes. It was called a troubadour harp, which is actually about 3/4 size, and it doesn't have any pedals on the bottom. Instead, it has levers.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more reduced in what you can do with it as far as chromaticism and that type of thing. But for the size that I was, my feet still dangled off of the bench, and I couldn't touch the floor yet. So it was the perfect size for me at that time.
And were you brought up in any particular tradition, or because I know now you have more with this beautiful ambient sound, but was it classical?
Well, I was classically trained.
Okay.
I have 2 degrees in music performance from Indiana University in Bloomington, and I did concerts as a classical soloist for many years. And then I decided that instead of recording classical music, I wanted something that was really my own and something that I could share with the world that would be different from another harpist, but another musician.
Yeah.
And so I decided to start composing, and it was a really interesting journey to decide to do that, and then to find myself writing this current album and being nominated for a Grammy Award. So that was amazing.
Which is incredible. But let's talk a little bit before we get to Aquamarine. Let's talk a little bit about you. Performed with some crazy people, Jay-Z, Beyoncé,
Yes.
I think Michael Bublé, right?
Yes.
Why did I say Bublé? But Andrea Bocelli, just like a who's list. So what was that like? Any shaping your experience of adding different kinds of sounds and?
Absolutely. I mean, I think all experiences are good ones, and those experiences for sure were very defining, especially for that period of time in my life. I started playing with Kanye West actually as like the very first, and that was back in 2005, playing for Live 8 in Philadelphia.
Awesome.
And then it just kind of your name gets passed around, and the artists know who you are, and they decide to put you on their gig, and it was a really exciting time. And I think one of my favorite memories was playing with Jay-Z at Carnegie Hall, and we were taking a break, and they were playing some of the track, so they could hear the levels, and there was this little quiver that happened on the track, and I thought, oh, I can do that on the harp, and I was I was mic'd and amplified, and so I just did the little quiver, and everyone stopped and like turned around and said, "What was that?" And then they said, "Put it in the show. It sounds great." So, so there were opportunities also for me to kind of add a little of my own sauce to some of the performances, which was fun.
Yeah, really experiment. So you mentioned Aquamarine before, which is such a beautiful album, Grammy-nominated, as you mentioned, and deeply personal to you.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about, the songs, and it obviously refers to the ocean, what that means to you?
Well, the album was actually written as an homage to my late mother and our shared love of the ocean and the protection of the ocean. So the song titles all have ocean-related themes. I Am Water, Sea Idol, Naiads, Into the Mist, different things that relate to my personal journey with my mom and the times that we spent near blue spaces.
It's a beautiful escapism on that album. I feel like the other day I was sitting at work, I was stressed, and I put your album on, and it is able to calm you so much. So tell us about like the power of music for stress and just to make us feel better.
Absolutely. I mean, I personally choose to listen to ambient music when I need to lower my blood pressure. So there was definitely a connection there for me to want to write that kind of music to help other people as well. And I think the harp in general has a very soothing sound to it. It can be very percussive if you want it to be, but it can also be very mellow and very soothing. And I think, one of the things that was really difficult for me when I first started composing was leaving space in music, to leave room for the ambient part of it, and to be able to have, areas where the mixing process could take hold and actually add what I was looking for to make the song whole. And that to me, when people listen to the music and tell me that they've found peace listening to it, or that it helped them with a grief that they possibly are struggling with, that's really meaningful to me, and that makes it all worthwhile for me.
So what's it like bringing this show to everyone? Because I know it's more, you're playing this beautiful music, but it's also a visual experience that you bring.
It is. I think I'm a visual player to begin with, but I decided that for the Aquamarine live shows, when I'm playing in front of audiences with this album, I collaborated with Lori Allender, who is a a New York-based. I'm Brooklyn-based. She's New York-based. She's a visual artist, and she created this beautiful 1 hour long visual experience that's just undulating, patterns of kind of abstract water images.
Yeah.
And it really adds an immersive element to the show that I think is really compelling.
Well, it's definitely, worth seeing music live. Hearing it is wonderful when you get to see it in a studio, but just hearing it live, there's nothing like it. So tell us a little bit, some of those sounds you were talking about that you learned with the plucking. Is there anything that you've included with this album now, with all these electronic things that you can do?
Well, truthfully, a lot of the sounds that you hear are created through the mixing process.
Yeah.
So the only real effects that I'm using within the compositional part of it are harmonics, which is when you pluck the string and it makes the sound the octave higher, and it creates a nice bell-like sound. So I use a lot of harmonics in my writing, just because I like especially the effect, being able to grab onto that and then lengthen it and turn it into something totally different. So the mixing process is really where a lot of the special sauce comes from. And I don't include a lot of the traditional effects of the harp, like sweeping the strings or the quiver, like I mentioned, because it doesn't really play into what I'm writing. If I found that I was writing a composition that would make that possible, then I would certainly use it, but not for these songs.
This particular. Well, you're going to continue to release more music, which we're excited to hear, and again, live shows. But for now, we have the absolute treat of hearing you play a couple of songs for the album. So thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And audience, sit back and enjoy the just beautiful sounds of Kirsten Agresta Copely. you.